Federico, this is the Global Digest think tank group. You are our guest today. How can you say yourself, please, Federico?
Well, I'm a professor. I'm currently professor of contemporary history at the Link Campus University of Rome. Previously professor of European governance at the University L'Orientale in Naples. I'm also currently researcher at the Istituto Affari Internazionali, which is a Rome-based think tank.
I see. So, Europe is very interesting in terms of international politics. Europe is more listened to US or how's US-European alliance and how long lasts the US-Europe alliance?
Well, actually, the main challenge for Europe is being seen as a bloc rather than a collection of different states. That's the main challenge. And that's maybe even the main misunderstanding with the United States. If Europe presents itself as a loose confederacy of member states that have their own foreign policy, as long as they do that, Europe's position weakens, not only vis-à-vis the US, but vis-à-vis the rest of the world. What we would like to see actually in Europe is a more cohesive Europe, at least in foreign policy. And now the transatlantic relationship is indeed in trouble because, as you've seen, the tariffs are posing a danger to these historic alliance. And at the same time, even the Greenland issue is challenging a bit the stability of the transatlantic relationship, and therefore we have these tense relationship. As far as Greenland is concerned, we have solved the problem through a coordinated approach. So I'm quite satisfied, I think many of us are, of the reaction, about the reaction of the European capitals and European head of states, especially those such as France, Germany, Italy, that stood up together to preserve the integrity of Greenland, the independence of Greenland. And that's the kind of unity that actually can strengthen the European position. So to answer your question, it really depends on the posture that Europe has.
See, when you say about Greenland, and Greenland is an U.S. base in Greenland. At the moment, U.S. also based in military base in Greenland, right? And U.S. want more. Is an intention is more security? Is that part of NATO strategy, or it's not at all about NATO strategy? It's just U.S. alone interest. How can you say that?
Well, I think that we need to distinguish two different things. The security aspect, which pertains indeed to the NATO realm, and in that regard, the US are rightly worried about Greenland and what Greenland could become, even in a near future. On the one hand, there is the challenge of the Russian Navy or any hostile navy that could surround Greenland, and at the same time, in the near future, I see the opening of the Arctic route, and the Arctic route is an important chokehold. Is going to be an important chokehold in the international trade, and therefore the US are concerned about the security of that route, of that future chokehold. At the same time, however, I feel that the US have their own interest in the game and their own purposes, among which we see certainly the exploitation of rare earth elements in Greenland, and even concerning the security of the Arctic and the future trade routes. I don't understand that. I think many people in Europe don't understand whether this concern is about the Western security, the security of the Western hemisphere, or rather the US interest, the possibility of the US to control that route, that commercial route. That's the main point. So if we want to see this US policy challenge as a security matter, maybe they should involve NATO indeed. But if this kind of aggressive pressure on Europe is due to internal, and domestic reasons, or for the glory of the US and the future of the US, in that case, we have a possible misunderstanding or possible actually clash between the two sides of the Atlantic, because at the same time we don't have as European Union um, many harbors in that Arctic Sea and in that future Arctic trade route. Greenland is one of the few, and therefore we absolutely need as EU that trade route in the European game of commerce and trade. Our countries are export oriented. At the same time, we import a lot of things, and raw materials and so forth from all over the world. So that trade route is vital to us. So if the US really act to protect their allies, we can solve the issue through NATO. But of course, if the challenge is the US national interest against the European one, that's a completely different matter.
I see. So it is, yes, it's look like complicated, although I mean it's very appropriate in terms of security point of view. Basing US troops in Greenland is look good. It will be a strategic security location for Europe if US strongly based in Greenland. It will be backbone for European security too, But you see, it's less concerned about European interest. I don't know how much European capacity without US, how European can able to manage Greenland and how can arrangement by European countries. And in spite, Europe has a lot of US troops inside mainland Europe, and it will be reshaping European military, or NATO will be reshaping. How do you see in the future?
Well, I think that we should not underrate our own military capacity nor overrate those of our rivals, such as China and Russia. What we can offer is indeed a strong navy, though divided across different member states. But if we put all the most important navies, at least of Europe, together, we have a force that must be acknowledged. Okay, so we should not underrate our power projection, especially considering the fact that Greenland is close to European borders, and these other powers, Russia and China, did not so far demonstrate to have a great military outreach. We see, quite on the contrary, that China is very reluctant to deploy its navy, the Pacific Ocean, and as even some limitations due to Taiwan, due to some not amicable powers that are surrounding the country. We see also on the Russian side that in the Black Sea, they've struggled against Ukraine, despite the fact that Ukraine did not possess a real, navy to fight against the Russian one. The US are particularly concerned about submarines and the underwater domain, but I believe that we are stepping up as Europeans in that domain too. Our navies, our Minister of Defense in general, have a strong focus today on the underwater. And therefore, what I see is a strengthening of the European navies through time and European armies alongside. We are spending more money. We're investing a lot of money, both as European Union and as member states, doubling and sometimes tripling our investments. So I see in the near future a strong European capacity, military capacity, and therefore we should not, underrate the European military might, even if it's not comparable with the US one. But we should not, and that's my approach, my viewpoint, we should not compare the European military power with the US one, because that would imply that the two of them are rival. Indeed, we should instead look at China, look at Russia, the real rivals of Europe, and ask ourselves, okay, can they reach Greenland? How? And can we contrast them? That's the main question. If we can, that's the game.
I see. I see. I mean, in terms of Chinese military, I don't think Chinese will be ever involved in Greenland conflict unless one of the European country invited China to involve in Greenland. Otherwise, I don't think China is likely to involve in Greenland because of location and geopolitically. But Russia can be, that is the thing. It may be Europe can do more things in the future because you increase military budget and all these capacities. So it may be a little bit reshaped in NATO military strategy, I guess. But I don't know, nowadays European ideology is unsatisfactory about European approach to the war, especially in case of Burma. One of Catholic priests was killed, persecuted by NUG-based local militia, inspired a lot of military government persecuted Christian churches.
Sometimes it really depends on the proclivity of the single leader leading a nation, leading a group. That's mostly the soft power of the Vatican, and of course the ties between the Vatican and civil society in that particular country. These are the two factors: the sensitivity of the leader and the sensitivity of society. These are the two leverages on which the Vatican can play, because otherwise, of course, as Stalin would put it, the Vatican doesn't have a military, doesn't have an army, a real army. So they are the champions of soft power nowadays for this very reason. The Pope is an authoritative figure. I think that even leaders from other religions, Islam, Buddhism, could recognize to the Pope such a role of moral leadership. This is what I believe and hope. But besides that, of course, as I told you, the leverages of the Vatican are not many, and they can play a role in some important contexts, such as the United States, a nation which has an important Catholic minority, a lot even of Southern and Central American immigrants that are mostly Catholic, and some of them very well integrated in the US society. Second generation, third generation Catholics. So in that case, the Vatican message can be echoed through society. At the same time, we see a lot of American leaders who are Catholic. Paradoxically, the situation in Europe is more complex, because whereas Catholicism and Christianity is still predominant in Europe, I would not say that the European society and Christianity are overlapping that much nowadays. We do have secular states, and the secular societies in which the message of Christian movements or the Vatican itself is not so well received many times. Therefore, I'm feeling that following the guidelines of the Vatican is really something relying upon the goodwill of the single leader, of the European single leader, rather than a pressure coming from society or the electorate and the constituency from which these leaders come. The Vatican, in the Protestants in other countries, the Christian leaders in general, even the Orthodox Church, they lost some important battles in the past, as you know, the battle for divorce, abortion, a lot of civil rights. And now they are at odds with these movements, with a lot of civil rights movements. And I don't see, Christianity as much influential in Europe today. But if you focus on foreign policy, maybe things are slightly different. Protecting Christians is still today, I think, one of the pillars upon which the European External Action Service is built, and something that the European foreign policies are really attentive to. This is a bit of a contradiction, but if you frame this foreign policy, this European foreign policy, as a protection of human rights in general, that's completely coherent with Christianity. In many African states or Middle Eastern states, the rights of the Christians are at stake. And therefore, if you want to protect human rights in general, you care about the rights of the Christians. At the same time, however, we should not forget that probably the EU and even at the level of single member states of the EU, Italy, Germany, France, Poland, defending the minority rights, like gay rights, is equally important. Okay, so I would say that we have a complex landscape, but boiling it down to what we do is protecting human rights across the spectrum, in comprehending the rights of the Christians, something that many of our leaders still care of, but even human rights in general. This is our, main goal in these different contexts, if we address ethical values.
I mean, European once upon a time very good in human rights. I'm not sure nowadays. Criticism about human right implementation and human right advocacy. Even UN itself is outcrying a lot of human right were disregarded or ignored by many countries. Even they don't want to pay for a lot of humanitarian issue by many rich countries, including European countries. You said it's true. Europe used to be once upon a time very good human right, and also ideology point of view. You point out Christian ideology is dramatically declined in Europe, and each country in Europe is declining. Almost they are forgetting soft power, Christian-based soft power. Isn't it a wrong policy, or it's a mistake? European has made a mistake about undermining or ignoring soft power.
Well, how I do see it's strictly personal, of course. So I'm leaving my hat as an expert and taking on my other hat as a person. Yes, indeed, they have a lot of problems in doing that. You need to put yourself in their shoes, our diplomats if they were outspokenly in favor of the Christian communities across the world, the backlash, even within Europe, would be important. All these groups, which are very skeptical about the Catholic Church or or Christianity as religion, would wonder why we are actually, following a Christian pathway, a Christian approach to foreign policy, something that they will not agree with. And therefore, we have this huge internal problem, domestic issue, and this protection of Christian rights is left in the hands of our diplomats on the field most of the times. According to my personal experience, our diplomats are mildly taking care of that. Christian rights, of course, depending on the sensitivity of each country. The more the country is Christian, the more they are likely to protect Christians' rights and to forge alliances, even in these different countries, in different local communities, with the Christian groups that are threatened or simply, politically active. But it's really left to the single delegation in place. And there are indeed countries such as Hungary, Poland, maybe Italy today, that could be more sensitive about that. Other countries that I feel, and I will not mention them, and I will not name them, that are quite less sensitive about Christian rights. So, yeah, I personally believe that it would be useful for Europe and even just for, for a question of moral cohesion and moral consistency. But yes, this opinion would be unpopular in many countries, in many communities, political families, also in Europe.
I see. I mean, it's moral issue as well as soft power issue. But you point out most those diplomat individual made their own style or their own behave in that policy making.
As you say, there is even a very complex and sensitive political issue at stake here, because if we side as Europeans with someone, with some communities or some parties, and we displease others, and that would create troubles in our bilateral relationships. That's really concerning, from European viewpoint, because okay, soft power works and is indeed useful and is even a commonality of values, not only of interest, but interest is still there in foreign policy. And if we want to do business with those countries, we need to agree with those in power. We need, to find a common ground, not to help their political enemies and not to oppose openly their policies, because otherwise no business and no political cooperation between our countries. Therefore, that's a limit, okay, to what we can do.
I mean, it's true according to diplomatic engagement, but I mean, especially I'm talking about Burmese issue. Burmese is military government. No European are interested to engage with the military government or bilateral engagement, either with military government. You did not get benefit, and you did not engage at all. Also, that is part of human right. You are acting, that will mean you are implementing human right too, because protecting Christianity.
This is a question for our foreign ministries. I agree mostly with you.
But I think European is also dramatically declining Christian faith. That is also main issue, So they are not interested at all, because they are no more good in faith. So you cannot be revived spiritual, because if you are not strong faith, you have no willing to do any any mission, you know. So that's I think big problem in Europe overall because the decline of faith also society is also decline. Political political system, political influence also decline. And in Christian perspective, probably Ukraine case, maybe God punished European.
Yeah, this is as you told me, it's evidently declining throughout society. Yes, it's becoming more secular. Yes.
But I don't know if Vatican request, so if they request Italy government to do something, diplomacy or military engagement, can Italy government willing to listen Vatican
As
request?
far as I know, there is a strict cooperation between the two of them. Our foreign ministry is cooperating closely with the Vatican Secretary of State, which is actually Monsignor Parolin. Yes, there is such a cooperation. Such a cooperation exists, and it's thriving, as far as I know. Okay, so of course, in many matters, the two of them diverge. The two foreign policies are not completely overlapping. Uh, of course, the Vatican is more attentive to Christian rights, as you said, is more attentive to protecting some values, even in those countries, not only defending human rights in general, but focusing on some of them and mediating conflicts. Maybe they do mediate uh, uh, even more than a traditional diplomatic corps, even because they can rely on Christian groups, society, Christian leaders. So they have such kind of outreach. They don't have, unlike a state, a traditional state, a national state, they don't have a particular interest, an economic interest, or a military, entanglement with that country or that reality, and thus they can just act as a moral authority in mediating conflicts, in mediating human rights, without casting doubts over their neutrality and the good faith